there's this myth, going back to where we did start, is that it's basically an even playing field. It's basically a just system. If you work hard and apply yourself, good things will happen. And again, on an individual level, that's your only option in life, is to work hard and apply yourself. But to think that you are on an even playing field is very, very wrong. It's not. And so I think a lot of people sit back and say, well, we'll just leave it up to the big business and the CEOs, and they're really smart, and they produce all the wealth, and everything's going to be fine in the long run, and we'll just let them take us in the direction that they think we should go. Going back to that, Ayn Rand.
Absolutely, and then you add on to that, they think that the Tea Party is right. We have a huge budget deficit. This is an unsustainable path we're on, and we have to now become fiscally responsible. And that's totally true. It is unsustainable. We do have to get on a fiscally responsible path. But if we do what they're saying, which is just to cut the entitlement programs, put in a balanced budget amendment, a requirement for that, we're going to go into a severe economic depression that's going to, right now, the official figures are that we have 9% unemployment. But if we went back and we computed unemployment the way we did during the Reagan administration, it would be over 20%.
Yeah.
And if we cut government spending at a time when our economy is very fragile, there really has been no recovery, as my pointing out that we have 20% unemployment. And by the way, that's a very important topic, how statistics have been bastardized. That's a whole nother thing, the way we are manipulated.
We might cover that. We might cover that on another call if we get the chance. But yeah, and this as someone trained in the discipline of economics, that there are all these measurements, and for unemployment, what's real unemployment, what's real inflation, what's real growth, and those numbers have been monkeyed with to a degree that I think the average person has no idea. And your point that if we use the standards of the 80s, we would have 20% unemployment. If we use the inflation standards of the 80s, we'd have over 10% inflation, because somehow inflation no longer. 15, wow. Because now inflation somehow no longer includes things like food and fuel and all the things that people actually need to spend every day. They've just completely.
That's only the tip of the iceberg.
We need to do a whole call on that. As we wrap up, there is one story that we were talking about yesterday that I think sums all this up on a micro level beautifully. This idea of the fact that the powerful have way too much power, which they are clearly abusing. And, it has showed up in banking, and it showed up in the case of this company that you were doing an audit for. But it also shows up in basic quality of life issues, and one of the qualities of life is medical care. Why don't we wrap up by you telling, if you would, as much of this story as you'd like about this MRI company and their technical breakthrough and the literal threats they received for daring to actually create a better MRI, and how those threats were delivered and by whom.
Yeah, it's really something. It's really sad. We call them banksters, but there are gangsters throughout the business world. This company came up with a different type of MRI. Most MRIs are closed, and if anyone has ever had an MRI, you lay down, and this sort of like card, it wheels you in, you go in, and your whole part of you is encased in a little tunnel, and then it makes a lot of noise, and a lot of people who have problems with claustrophobia or children who get scared, they just have to be anesthetized, knocked out, put in there, and if they have any type of limitations physically where they're sensitive to that, then they're out of it for a couple of days afterwards. But this company has an open MRI, and it's an MRI where you don't have to just take the MRI lying on your back. There's no other position that a standard MRI can work in because you're enclosed in this teeny little space. So with them, you can be standing, sitting, bending, almost any position, and it can take an MRI with a beautiful picture. Now, and so one of the things that's very important about that, there are a number of problems in the spine that if you're laying down, it's not going to come up on the image that comes up. Because laying down, your vertebrae are not dealing with gravity in the way that you do when you stand up, and the vertebrae will sit down, will lay down towards the surface that you're on, and no vertebrae will be pushing and pinching on the spinal cord. So if you can be in sitting and standing, if you can be in the position where you have the pain, you stand up, that vertebrae moves, and now all of a sudden you see exactly what the problem is. So that made this far superior product to the regular MRI, but MRIs are a huge business. MRIs are fabulously expensive pieces of equipment, and it's controlled, the MRI business, I think it was like 7 companies basically controlled it. And the biggest were like Toshiba, General Electric, Samsung. Big companies that are doing that. And this company, their product being superior, was threatening to really jump into this market and be very big. So they were going to do everything possible that they could to stop that from happening. And I got involved with this company because I saw what a great product they had, and I wanted to see if I couldn't help them. So I was working with them to help them to get financing for it because there had been a lot of pressure on banks, and they weren't giving them the financing. So I found someone who could finance it for them. And while I was working with them, I got to speak to someone who had been looking to buy this open MRI, and he said that, and during the process, he was going to buy it, and then he backed out. And I said, why did you back out? He says, well, to be honest with you, the salesmen from the other companies came in, and they said that if you buy that, we are going to spread all sorts of rumors saying that you bought a quack machine that doesn't work, and we were going to basically destroy your reputation. Are you willing to risk that? And he says, no, I'm not. And then he wound up buying one of theirs. And that was the way. It was pure blackmail.
Wow. I mean, does it get any more gangster than that?
No. And I mean, this is it. I mean, you know, in business, when there's a lot of money at stake, people are going to try to make that money, and they're going to be willing to do things that are unethical. But the whole purpose of government outside of business, outside of that libertarian model, is to have laws. One of the big purposes of creating the United States, and what was so wonderful about it with the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, is that the United States was supposed to become a nation of laws, not a nation of men. And through the years, it's now well over 200 years since then, it is now once again a nation of men, not a nation of laws. The laws have been totally subverted, subjugated, ignored, put on the back burner. You know, we see today tons of whistleblowers who are getting prosecuted, persecuted by the United States government in terrible ways, only for saying, hey, you know, the United States government is breaking laws. It's no longer okay to say the truth in this country. I mean, and this is something that has gotten way off, and the true role of government is to protect our rights, that the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the laws of this land be upheld. And now, as we saw with the Bush election, you know, even you go to the Supreme Court, it's totally biased. They have a political agenda, and they will come up with the conclusion that their politics dictates, and it's no longer about law. What is right is what is just. It's not about the needs of the citizens. It's about the needs of those who are in power.
Well, and it you know, raises the question of, you know, what is the future of this country? And if, you know, for anybody that's traveled to or spent time in the third world, you know, you'll notice that they're backward in certain ways. And one of the burdens that third world people have is their governments are utterly corrupt. There is no rule of law. It is all about the people and who you know and who you can pay off and who likes you and who doesn't like you. And you're right, that's really one of the things that made the United States different and makes certain countries different too. But those countries are few and far between, and there definitely seems to be a slackage, a fallback, away from the rule of law. And it has economic consequences. And one of the consequences is going to be, and I think you pointed this out earlier, without saying it in so many words, it's going to be a pretty significant decline in the standard of living of everybody in this country. Certainly the people at the bottom.
There's no way around it. There is no way around it. It's going to happen, but the way they're doing it, it's going to be heavily slanted, where the burden of that is going to be on the have-nots and the haves.
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely, and that's who's targeted, but who's going to pay the price will really be everybody, because you can't have millions and millions of people disenfranchised economically without there being some consequences on the street. There's got to be an increase in crime. Just, talking about the 70s, I don't know how many people listening to this are old enough to have been around in the 70s or in New York City in the 70s, but, I mean, New York City was like a shooting gallery. I mean, it was a dangerous place, and I think part of that, a big part of that was the fact that there were just so many people that had absolutely no hope of education, of employment, of any kind of career, of any kind of sustainability for themselves, and they took to street crime. And so yes, it's the bottom part of our society that's being targeted explicitly. But if you're comfortable in middle class right now, you'll pay the price too in not being able to get around as safely as you used to, and all kinds of things. So, hey, Rob, I think we touched on a lot of really important topics. I hope we can bring you back maybe to talk about how the distortion of economic statistics has really messed things up royally, how that happened and how bad it really is. And we've learned a little bit about gangsterism in the medical profession, in the medical supply profession, in the certified public accountants profession. Talked about the bastardization of the principles of the Austrian school, and how really the Austrian school, for all its insight, missed a few key points. And that key point being, it's not true that it's an even playing field. People can get together in monopolies and cartels and syndicates and criminal organizations and wield power way out of proportion to what the average citizen, law-abiding citizen can wield. And unfortunately, those people seem to have, they don't seem to have, they absolutely do have the upper hand now. And I guess the question is, are we going to restore, beyond the current economic problems and the financial problems, are we going to restore the rule of law of the United States? And if we don't, the consequences are really severe and will be felt in people's standard of living. Already are. So, Rob Cohen, I want to thank you very much for joining us in our first ever interview on Real Econ TV. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to more conversations.
Yeah, the pleasure was mine. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed.